Good morning. At this time, we'd like to convene the meeting of the Joint Recycled Water Committee for Tuesday, March 29, 2016. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Chair Burt.
Here.
Councilmember Du Bois. Here. Vice Chair Estremera. Director Kremen. Here. Board Chair Keegan. Here. Councilmember Siegel. Here. Mayor Rutherford. Here. 6 present.
Thank you. And it's my understanding that Vice Chair Estremera is on his way, stuck in traffic, so hopefully will be joining us shortly. We have a first item, which is an open comment period for members of the public to be able to speak on items that are not otherwise on the agenda, and I don't have any speaker cards. So our next item is actually listed as an election of officers, which I wasn't aware was going to be on the agenda. We elected officers at the tail end of last year, but I think we should wait on this until the vice chair arrives and see if we can understand how that, what the intention was on that on the agenda. So moving on to approval of minutes, we have minutes from our October 15, 2015 meeting. And do we have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Second. Okay. Motion made by Councilmember Du Bois, seconded by Board Member Keegan. All in favor?
Aye. I'm going to abstain since
yes.
I wasn't here.
Yes. So abstentions by Mayor Rutherford and Councilmember Siegel. All right. So we can now move on to our first action items. The first is an update on the Palo Alto Regional Water Quality Control Plant Recycled Water Strategic Plan, and I see both Mr. Boble and Mr. Hall are listed to present, and who would like to begin?
I'll begin.
Phil, do you want to go there so that you got a mic?
We'll keep this sort of informal by Garth chiming in on certain slides, and Karin North is with me up here, also in our Public Works group, Watershed Protection. So Karin will be adding as well. So she is showing you a sort of busy looking chart, but it's one that we've developed to try to show in one visual all the sort of planning activities and design activities that are occurring in the northwest part of the county. And we're calling it the Northwest Santa Clara County at the suggestion of the Water District, because the word north gets used in certain ways. And so really what we're talking about is the service area of the Regional Water Quality Control Plant, which includes Mountain View, the major partner. Greg from Mountain View is here, and he'll keep me honest as the largest of our partners. And Palo Alto, Los Altos Hills, Stanford, and the East Palo Alto Sanitary District, which is a portion of the city of East Palo Alto. And the other entities that will be crucial to our work are just across the border, the rest of the city of East Palo Alto, and Menlo Park and other adjacent communities in San Mateo counties will also be important to our work as we consider groundwater, since it knows no boundaries, and actually surface water too. So we're thrilled to have the new members with us, Donna from East Palo Alto and Lenny from Mountain View. Absolutely thrilled to have you. So that's how we defined this northwest corner. I'm sorry, I think I said northeast. Northwest corner of the county. And here are all the activities that are going on. And I'm not going to go over all of them, Greg is going to focus on the Mountain View portion, which is that salmon-colored piece at the bottom. So we'll, in a moment, Greg has a couple of slides to brief you on what's coming in Mountain View. The thing I wanted to mostly focus on are those 4 purple pieces, which the idea is that those pieces will make up an RFP that we're just about to issue. And we're sort of calling that the strategic plan for the moment to, and if anybody has a better name, ideas are welcome, but for the moment we're calling that the strategic plan, RFP, work plan, and it consists of those 4 purple elements. So I'll just go over them briefly because it will be important in what we talk about today. So just starting in the upper right-hand corner, we've got the next phase that's planned but not approved or certain of the Palo Alto purple pipeline recycle water system. So most of the current system that's fed by the regional plant in Palo Alto, most of that system feeds Mountain View currently. And this would be the biggest addition we've done yet to the city of Palo Alto part of the system. And you'll see Perkins and Daly under there. That's not a law firm that's suing us or anything. That's 2 staff members in in our utilities department, because our utilities department is the water purveyor in Palo Alto. So Public Works runs the sewage treatment plant, and think of them as, and me, as the wholesaler of the recycled water for our Northwest area. And then think of our utilities department as the water retailer. So they're going to, and both, I think both Carla and, yes, they're raising their hands. They're real people. They are both smiling. They are going to run this part of the work plan because it's ultimately, if we do it, it'll be part of the water distribution system. I mean, it won't be connected to the, you know what I mean. Okay, so that's Perkins and Daly over there. They're also a comedy team at times. And then just moving straight down, you see the next piece is this groundwater, lower and upper aquifer analysis, recharge, storage. We threw all those those words there because we've got a fair amount of work ahead of us to consider, and just consider at this time, whether it makes any sense at all to use water, possibly recycled water, to either store in our local groundwater or recharge the aquifer. You know, there's a million questions there. So we're not going into it assuming anything. We've had a lot of discussions, good discussions with the water district staff. And I think we all recognize that the northwestern part of the county and frankly the southern part of San Mateo County have not been exhaustively studied from a groundwater perspective. There's work to be done. So we're going to take the first steps at that. We've got a work plan devised that's staged in its nature so that if we do stage 1 and we see, well, this is a completely crazy idea, we don't need or can't recharge this aquifer or store water in this aquifer, then we stop. But if it looks like it's worth continuing, then we have different phases that we continue forward and answer more and more detailed questions as we go, if we decide it's needed. So I wanted to emphasize that because this is a new area for all of us, but we know for many of our city council people and sanitary district people too, we are going to get asked the question, hey, what about groundwater recharge? Shouldn't we be thinking about that? And right now we don't have enough information to say definitively whether that's a good idea or a bad idea. And So this is designed to get us to answering those questions. Okay, so continuing straight down, then you see regional water quality control plant partner agencies' interest in recycled water. Here we're working with all the partners, but principally the partners other than Mountain View. Mountain View has been actively engaged, arguably really the main driver in the recycled water program in the Northwest County. But the other agencies have not used recycled water yet. The last time we did a serious study of this situation was in the early 1990s, a very long time ago. Some of you weren't born. So we know we want to go back to our partners. We think the one that is most likely to be next to use the recycled water is the city of East Palo Alto, and that's why I think why the other members, Donna, really wanted you to be part of this, and we really appreciate you doing it at the mayor level. I think that's a great signal of interest to us, and we really appreciate it. So again, no preconceived conclusions, but we know we want to at least reconsider, should we be taking stronger actions, more vigorous actions to get water to East Palo Alto and the other partners where it doesn't exist. So that's the part of the study there. Oh, I thought you were going to say something, Gary. By the way, I don't know what your advice is, Chair Burt, but if I'm completely interruptible, however you want to run it. But I see that Gary's just signaling. Oh, good. Okay, then last bullet, and then I'll shut up for a minute. The very center of the chart is, by design, an integrating piece. So again, we haven't really done planning for the recycled water in Northwest County since the early 90s. So we'd take all these activities around the page, not just the ones I've described, but the others, which I'll let you read, take all of them and integrate them into an updated strategic plan. And that's why we call this effort on the RFP to do these purple pieces the strategic plan, because they'll all feed into a document. Not immediately, because we have to do the real work of all these other things first. So, and we haven't worked out an exact time schedule, but I would say it would be at least a year from now before we'd start trying to do the strategic plan, and we'd have all these pieces starting to come together so that we could have a meaningful update of our earlier plan. So that's primarily what I wanted to say. Karin, do you want to, are there some other slides we should walk through under this item 5.1? Yes. All right. Yeah, do it.
Hi, my name's Karin North. I'm the Watershed Protection Manager at the Regional Water Quality Control Plant. I work for the City of Palo Alto Public Works and Environmental Services. So Phil gave a great overview, so I'm going to go in a little bit more detail on many of these pieces, because we call this Phil's bubbles chart, and we have to try and, it's the visual of how all these fit together, but I'm going to give you more information for each one. And if it's too much detail, let me know and I can skip over slides. I don't have Phil next to me nudging me, telling me I need to move along, so that's a good thing for me. So the one thing that we didn't talk about is this advanced water purification system feasibility study, which is the top left corner. So we're further along on this piece of this large, big picture for recycled water. And we are the objective for this feasibility study is to improve the recycled water quality. So currently, our TDS is now around 900, 950 coming out of the wastewater treatment plant. And, sorry, salinity. Total dissolved solid salinity. Thank you, Phil. And it's a concern for people that use recycled water. And that is actually why when we did the environmental impact report for phase 3 of our recycled water pipeline, which many of you don't know about, but it's to go to South Palo Alto and to Stanford Research Park, we actually looked at what would the potential implications with our current salinity be. And we have a lot of mitigations in there. And one of the things we were looking at is actually if we were to pre-treat and blend, which is what this feasibility study is. And this is also a request from Mountain View because they currently receive most of our recycled water. And if you go over to the Shoreline Amphitheater area, we have been monitoring the redwood trees there, and now they're starting to take down some of the redwood trees. So there's concern because it's the perfect storm with the drought and recycled water, and redwood trees probably shouldn't be planted in that area as well. But so it is something that we are concerned about. So our goal is to improve the recycled water quality. It's probably going to be microfiltration or reverse osmosis or something comparable. So we're not sure which one, but we've been working with a consultant, or we will be working with a consultant. So we would like to have a 450 goal of parts per million for total dissolved solids. Yeah.
Board Member Kremen has a question.
Sure.
You know, before we launch into some of the technical things,
Sure.
I just wanted to give a overriding comment that I'm happy that we've been able to get together, and I'm especially happy to see a member from East Palo Alto, a community that hasn't had what I call, they've gotten an unfair deal from a social justice point of view in water allocation, and that they're part of this chart potentially. And if there would be a way that we can, while they're not in the county, help them out from a potable drinking water point of view, I'm really excited about this to actually move the needle there if potentially possible. So I'm excited. So I know we're going into the technical stuff, but I just want to give an overriding comment. Thank you, Chair.
Well, and I'll just add that as one of our partner agencies in the Regional Water Quality Control Plant, East Palo Alto is very much part of this entire program. So as are Stanford and Los Altos and Los Altos Hills. So we have actually 6 agencies that are partners.
Correct. So I'm going to keep on. This isn't too much detail. You just let me know. So when looking at the advanced water purification system, we're a 25-acre facility, but if you have ever done a tour of our facility, we're pretty tightly compacted. We currently incinerate our biosolids, which we're looking more to move to a dewater and haul building facility because we just don't have space. We're very space constrained. So part of it is sizing and location of our existing facility. Where can we actually place this advanced water purification system? And then what is the energy and greenhouse gas components? What is the implications on that? Because we're really, as a city, trying to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And then how are we going to handle this RO concentrate, which is something that the Water District has been working actively with San Jose's wastewater treatment plant because they have this advanced water purification system, and brine concentrate is really going to be our hurdle for all of the lower South Bay dischargers of how are we going to handle this RO concentrate. Sunnyvale's also looking into this as well. So there's a regional scale for us to be looking at this. And then scalability. Is this we probably will not want to build the largest facility, but we want to make it scalable. So as our demands go up, we can increase the size of this facility. And then we are asking them to do a cost estimate and then determine if we have to do any CEQA and other regulatory requirements to get something passed, and then a preliminary design. So that's in this current draft contract that will hopefully be signed in the middle of April. We're going to council.
Excuse me.
So the fees, yeah.
Quick question. Is the concentrate considered a hazardous waste?
It's not considered a hazardous waste, but when you blend with our discharge for our NPDS, we still have to comply with our NPDS permit compliance. So we have limits of what we can discharge out into the San Francisco Bay, and some of them are concentration based.
So where is it likely to go?
Probably at the very beginning, we'll be able to blend it with our existing discharge, but as demand goes up, then we'll have to look at other options. So that's part of the study is is there a precipitation option? There might be other solutions to remove maybe the heavy metals that we're concerned about to make sure that we can comply with our NPDS permits. So that will be part of the study. Great question. So the feasibility study is going to cost around $325,000, and the nice thing is this is a partnership between the district, Mountain View, and Palo Alto, and the district is paying 80%, and Palo Alto and Mountain View paying 10% each. So we've already selected our consultant. It's M&S Engineering GHD. The contract is hopefully going to be signed. We are tentatively on the agenda right now for April 18th, but we might get pushed out. So by the end of April, we'll have a contract signed. And the core items, we're on a fast track for this. Deliverables will be by the end of this year. So we really want to get answers now for the feasibility study so then we can just determine next steps. And then all the deliverables, because there's a lot of additional services tasks in there, are the end of the following year. So Phil already gave the overview of all of the pieces. That's the first piece of the pie that goes into this recycle water strategic plan. So I'll talk to you a little bit more about the next stages. So this is the purple sections of that. So looking at the far right, top right corner is the Palo Alto Phase 3 recycle water to South Palo Alto and Stanford Research Park. So our CEQA and NEPA is already done and completed on that project. That was approved by council in September of last year. And now we're looking to look at a business plan and determine if it financially makes sense. We're also looking at the Northwest County. We should have tweaked this slightly, but the integrated IPR groundwater study, because that's really what we're looking at, is the opportunity to do indirect potable reuse. So taking purified water and injecting it in the groundwater, and if it's feasible for us. And then we're also looking at our service area partner interests. So East Palo Alto, Los Altos Hills, Stanford, and Mountain View. We want to make sure that we're providing an update to that 1992 master plan for recycled water. So that's our goal. So that's the consultant contract. But there's a lot of other pieces that are going into that strategic plan. So we, as Palo Alto staff, will be developing this white paper on all the different water sources within Palo Alto, which has been a lot of discussion with our council. This also the discussion on satellite and on-site treatment and reuse and stormwater use. There's a lot of large tech industries that are now looking at doing on-site reuse. And so how is that going to impact the wastewater treatment plant, or how is that going to modify what we end up potentially doing in the future? So just making sure that we've got our finger on the pulse and we know what's happening in the community. Currently, it's mostly happening in Mountain View, not in Palo Alto. We haven't had any projects come forward in Palo Alto that I know of. And then our potable water supply resource plan, which Carla told me is the incorrect title. It's the integrated water resources plan. So that's also what utilities is working on. So some of the major deliverables in the RFP that we're putting together is that Phase 3 recycle water expansion business plan, preliminary design of that Phase 3, and then coming up with a funding plan. So we really want to see if it's cost effective and if we can get some federal and state funding for it. And then the indirect potable reuse feasibility study to see where, we talked to you guys the last meeting about where the potential recharge area is. So that's where this pipeline might make sense by getting it up towards that area is where the recharge is, and what are the potential future for an indirect potable reuse system. And then we also want to have a conceptual groundwater model to get a sense of what are the inputs, what are the outputs coming. We just don't have a great idea of what's happening in our groundwater system within Northwest County, Santa Clara County. So that's part of it, and that's where Menlo Park and East Palo Alto, all of our partner agencies, and San Mateo County is going to be part of that as well. And so we had actually pulled together all of the partner interested parties and did basically a planning workshop to make sure that all of the components in the RFP would appease all the partner agencies and member agencies. So we've already done that. Yeah, Garth.
Karen, may I just add something
Absolutely.
there for the sake of the district board members? So the district is involved in, as well known, a fairly extensive study involving particularly the groundwater recharge aspect of purified water. And in doing so, we're close to finishing our studies using a consultant to provide more in-depth groundwater modeling that we've done across the entire county than has been done in the past. So one of the things that, as we engaged, as you implied, is that we work together with you to make sure that we don't reinvent the wheel here. Since the district has a big interest in efficiency, and so do you, a lot of the modeling baseline is available to you, and we'd be happy to make it available and to if there's any questions, to support answering those questions. Not to do the refined modeling that you need to do, but make sure that we leverage what we already have.
So I should have, we have been, all of this has been in very good concert with Mountain View, Santa Clara Valley Water District, and all of our partner agencies as well. So all of these meetings we've been having at staff level have been including all of the agencies that might be impacted. And so we wanted to make sure that we were really having this RFP vetted before it's being released. So it's scheduled to be released soon. Yeah.
Committee member Siegel has a question.
So in looking at indirect potable reuse, are you looking at the known groundwater contamination in the area? We've got a lot of that in our cities.
So that will be part of the study as well, is looking at mapping where the current contamination is occurring. Is that in the shallow aquifer versus the deep aquifer? I'm anticipating the indirect potable reuse would be for the deep aquifer. So that would be part of the study, the groundwater study. This would be a consultant that we would be hiring. Do you want to add anything else, Phil?
Just wanted to ensure, Lenny, that this is very much on our minds, and that's why we thought it was important to, although, as Karin pointed out, the use would almost certainly be at the deep aquifer level, and most of that contamination is in the upper aquifer. We're going to have to study the connectivity between those two, and would pumping at depth pull from the surface? That's the question everybody has.
And at least one of the plumes in the Stanford Research Park is deep, I
yeah.
believe.
So we know, and that all, that's one reason I think we need a separate effort where we're focused on this Northwest county. As Garth pointed out, the Water District's got a world of information, but it's never, we've never done a study designed to answer those kinds of questions in the Northwest County. So it'll be using all that good information the Water District has, but trying to figure out how to answer these key questions for us in the Northwest County.
Okay. Member Du Bois.
So on the advanced water purification project, you said the goal is reducing salinity. Is the indirect potable reuse part of that project or a separate project? It wasn't really clear how it fit in.
So we have a little piece of the contract that's going to be signed April 18th to look at IPR, but the more depth study will be the second RFP. So the real driving force between the advanced water purification feasibility study, it's definitely a mouthful, is to look at lowering salinity. But a secondary basis, we'll be looking at the potential for IPR. But we need to be interconnecting it with groundwater. So that's why we don't want to put the cart before the horse.
Right. So I think the way to think of it is, and when we look to the south at what San Jose has done, I think we see sort of a good model. So they built a water purification facility, and step one for them was making the quality of their delivered irrigation water better, reducing salinity of the irrigation water. So that's step one. And then it can be step two or not be to use that water rather than blend it and create a better irrigation water, use it in its pure form to create a water which can be drunk, and then use that as a recharge for groundwater. So I think of us as studying the groundwater to determine the feasibility, and then studying reverse osmosis on a parallel track to and almost certainly improve the quality of the irrigation water provided, and then potentially B, groundwater injection.
So the investment in phase one in terms of reverse osmosis, would that be at the same quality level that we would use if we were going for potable reuse?
Part of the study is whether you can remove salinity without removing all of the constituents that you'd worry about if you were going to drink it, right? So there's an oxidation step that's probably required. So what we might do, and this will be part of the study though, is we could just do only reverse osmosis at first and only focus on salinity, but not ensure that we'd removed pharmaceuticals, viruses that you'd want to. And then design it though in such a way that were an easy add-on, that we could add on that oxidation step to get at those pharmaceuticals, viruses, the stuff that you'd worry about if you were going to drink it. So that's part of the study, is to decide whether to do it. It may prove to be, it's just while we're constructing this, and it'll be a small pilot, not pilot, but it'll be a relatively small scale facility. So it might not be too big of a deal just to go ahead and produce the highest level water right off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see the potable use elevated as a component of the plan and just make sure that we're not making short-term investments that aren't sufficient quality. I mean, as long as we have the option to add on, I think that makes sense.
Okay.
Yes.
Just want to add to, this is very important to us, to the district, the whole county. How we start the first project in indirect potable reuse or direct potable reuse, and this hasn't been anywhere in Northern California yet. So that's why the district has been working on it for 10 years. In the last 2 years, we have been working on the planning and which project is going to be the first one in the county. We have done a lot of outreach to make sure the public perception is going to be okay with that. So we have done a couple of master planning in the district, county. One of those was the biggest one, South Bay Water Recycling Master Plan, that finished in 2012. And this one is going to be additional one that we're going to do with the Palo Alto. But the next one is going to be comprehensive one that's going to look at the county-wide master plan in recycled water, which we're going to start very soon. And this part, the strategic planning, will be part of it. So that one is going to look at where the potential for IPR or DPR, indirect potable reuse, will be there. And we look at all the water quality stuff, public perception, everything in there.
I just have a couple follow-on questions. So the San Jose recycling plant uses RO and microfiltration, but not yet oxidation, correct?
The reason is because, yes.
Okay.
The reason is because it's not using for potable yet.
No, I understand that. I
Yeah.
just wanted to clarify that. So then in this presentation, I think Phil had talked about the prospect of microfiltration plus RO, and Karin had said or RO. And I wanted to be clear on
Or an
whether-
alternative, so a
Pardon me?
similar alternative. So it may not be reverse osmosis. There might be some new emerging technology that's similar.
She got her "or" in the wrong
Okay.
place there.
Okay, good enough. And the
it's-
reason why that stood out to me is that this is listed as a goal of 450 TDS. What's the San Jose TDS output?
The starting point or after the, after going to
your
advanced
RO
treatment?
and microfiltration? 500
plus minus 50.
Oh, that's all it is?
Right.
It's not lower than that. I thought it was lower yet.
Well, I think when it first comes out of the RO system, it's very, very low. It's probably under 50. I think that's what you're asking. What is it right out of the RO system? So it's almost like zero when you.
So is this bullet referring to a blended TDS?
Correct, blended.
Okay. So I think we need to clarify when we say a goal, if the process output goal is actually a low TDS, under 100, that would lend itself with oxidation to potable use, whether direct or indirect, then I think we need to be clear what the process goal is, and whether or not it is subsequently blended is a secondary decision. And great.
Yeah, and we'll work on the slide so that it better conveys that. That is the way we're structuring the study. Yeah.
Member Keaton?
I know that my colleagues on the Water District Board have already heard me say this a number of times, but I think it's really important to, and we've touched on it briefly, the public outreach component of this. When I went down to Orange County and did their tour there, it was very clear to me that public acceptance was very, very important. And so I'm sure it's an accident that it's the last on our bullet list, but in some ways it really should be the first, because the public really doesn't necessarily trust elected officials or bureaucrats or engineers when we're telling them that recycled water is perfectly safe for them. They want to hear it from public health professionals and doctors and even faith leaders. And so I don't think we should be getting out in front of ourselves in talking about either direct or indirect potable reuse without being very conscious of the fact that the public needs to feel a certain level of confidence in what the kind of water we're going to be providing.
But drinking it from the podium would help? Okay. Member Siegel?
Yeah, just perhaps there's a terminology issue. All of our water is indirect potable reuse. I mean, we make very little water, at a molecular level, and it's the same water, and people have to understand that.
Member Du Bois?
So I actually have a question in a different area. So the partner interest in recycled water in 2018, I guess I have a couple questions there. First of all, do we need to have those discussions before 2018?
We've already been starting to have those discussions. So when we were drafting the scope of the RFP, we were trying to figure out who would be interested in recycled water. So, and that's part of the reason why Mountain View is here as well.
And then I think we have a contract extension with Mountain View on recycled water coming to Palo Alto Council next week.
Correct.
And so I guess part of my question is, what's the impact of extending that contract now before we have this strategic plan in place? And what happens if, it's higher quality potable water versus irrigation water? I mean, are we locking ourselves in prematurely?
Well, since Greg isn't chiming in, I'll say, I will. Why don't you at least say why you want this thing, and then I'll explain it.
Well, from Mountain View's perspective, we currently have a supply agreement that runs through 2035. Really the main impetus for us to request an extension, and for you, the Palo Alto members, it's through 2060, was really to protect a supply that if we start doing any expansions throughout Mountain View and connecting to other agencies, that we have a supply locked in for a long term. With a 20-year water supply, well, now 19 years, we're comfortable that from an investment standpoint, we'd be getting return and having a supply assurance that we felt was necessary to invest the millions, if not tens of millions of dollars for the extension. So we're more comfortable with that long-term agreement.
But that's for irrigation water?
At this point, all the water use we're looking at for recycled within Mountain View is irrigation and possibly for dual plumb buildings.
Yeah, so I guess more for the water plan. I mean, what happens if, again, that's a long time, 2060, if we start to treat a fair amount of that as potable water, are we locked into not creating potable water because we need to?
The way it would work, and the way it works now, and with this time extension would be the same, is that we view each partner's water that they give us as their water. So it doesn't commit us to giving any more or less of Mountain View's water back to them. It just extends the time period. So think of Mountain View as contributing about 8 million gallons a day into the system. So we're viewing that 8 million gallons as Mountain View's water. And so the commitment is really just extending the amount of time for which Mountain View can know with certainty that, yes, they get that 8 million gallons back.
And does Mountain View have the flexibility if it comes back as potable water?
Well, I think from a use perspective, currently the water with its TDS is suitable just for a few things, but as the water quality changes, the potential use changes, we're certainly going to look at other alternatives. That's a great opportunity for us. So we're certainly, where we are today with recycled water and our specific use, we're not locked into for the long term, which is one of the reasons we're supporting the study. I think it's a great idea.
You're asking a great sort of line of questioning here, because one would love to produce water for different needs and be able to spend only as much money producing that water as you wanted to, right? You'd like to have irrigation quality water. Maybe you'd like to have cooling tower quality water, maybe drinking water. So it would be wonderful if we had multiple, probably 3 or 4 distribution systems that could ultimately carry this water back. But we're probably never going to have that. So The thing we have to work with Mountain View and the other partners on as we move forward is that decision of, well, what kind of water do you want us to put in the pipeline? We only have one pipeline now. So we can put this blended water in initially, which is the plan, and why Mountain View was actually the main driver originally in getting us going on this reverse osmosis thing, because they want to increase the quality of the landscape water. So that'll be the first thing we'll deliver. Then we'll work with Mountain View over time and we'll decide, well, what are we going to do here? Are we going to give everybody this higher quality water ultimately? Probably in some decade we will. But this agreement doesn't talk about the quality of water we give Mountain View. It only talks about the quantity of water we give, the one that's coming up to council. So this whole quality thing has to be worked out over time. As people's needs change, hopefully we'll be able to respond to that and agree jointly on what kind of water to stick in the pipeline. Or maybe we will have multiple pipelines at some point, you know, who knows?
Member Estremera.
Yeah, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong. It's my understanding that the water we're receiving now is not quite irrigation quality, in the sense that, at least for the Shoreline Golf Course, we have to blend potable water with the recycled water in order to do the landscaping. So although we're saying it's irrigation water, really for a lot of our uses it doesn't meet the quality standards.
Yes, right now we are blending, at the golf course, we are blending 60% recycled and 40% potable water. A couple reasons for that. Certainly the TDS is very high, but the golf course also sits on the landfill, which has a couple feet of dirt with clay under it, which prevents a whole lot of runoff. So the salts tend to pool there, so that's also had an impact. But yes, at this point, we do need to blend it for some of the uses in that area.
So I also had a couple follow-up questions on this subject. First, it was helpful to get that clarification that the model that we're approaching is essentially an input-output balancing from our partners have essentially rights to recycle water in proportion to the amount they put in, not the gallonage they put in, correct?
In proportion, yeah.
Okay. But then that raises the question of, as we move into recycled water, in the past we've been grateful that anyone was willing to take our recycled water. Now we're transitioning, and as the quality is improved, it becomes more valuable, and certainly if it is raised to the quality of potable water, it's of high value when we compare Hetch-Hetchy cost of in the neighborhood of $2,000 an acre foot. So whether it be the upcoming Mountain View agreement extension or other models with other partners, is there a pricing structure established there? Is it determined that water that presently has only the secondary treatment, not the tertiary, has zero value, and only after we have the tertiary treatment that we begin to place a higher value on it?
Good question, and we've been agonizing over this. So just the current situation is that the treatment plant doesn't charge Mountain View and wouldn't charge the other partners for recycled water, the actual water. Mountain View has paid the costs of getting the water to them, the distribution system. Generally speaking, we could go into the details on that. Mountain View got a lot of grants as well. But so that's the distribution system. The treatment costs we have not passed on to others yet. Why? Because they were so small that frankly it wasn't worth doing. The incremental cost of producing the water to Mountain View at meeting the standards that we have to meet for landscaping, the incremental cost of that was very, very small, and we just didn't feel it was worth the administration cost, frankly, of trying to figure that out. But that's changing, as you point out, and everybody knows we're going to have to establish a value for this water. Just wearing the sewage treatment plant hat, the thing that's logical is to charge those incremental costs. So, for example, the reverse osmosis thing, that needs to be paid for by the people that are using that water, not by all the partners. And so that'll really be the break point when we absolutely have to start charging those incremental costs. What we've talked to Mountain View about is, even if that isn't ready at that time, starting to charge and prepare ourselves for about 5 years from now. We need to have a system worked out certainly by 2020 to be charging for the water, just to sort of, and our own city departments too. Right now, the golf course, the Palo Alto golf course isn't charged for the water. The Greer Park isn't charged for the water. So that's going to have to change too. So we're trying to advise everyone that change is coming, but give them enough years so that it doesn't, so that they can plan for it.
And I can envision that even within the non-potable water reuse, there are civic uses, and then there are private commercial uses that are, I think, starting to use that. Is that correct? And so that begs a different question, which is, it's one thing for us to have an agreement with one of our member agencies for them to be able to use their water for their civic purposes. Do we all want to have the same understanding that it's their latitude if they want to give away that commodity versus to sell it at its fair market value, which, presumably a private commercial user is going to be paying hetch-hetchy pricing if they don't pay for the blending pricing that they have currently.
Right. So we're viewing that as sort of a decision for the team of Perkins and Daly in our utilities department. So they're the retailer. So we would just charge the retailer, including the city of Palo Alto, for the costs of producing this water, as I just described, the incremental cost. We wouldn't get into the value thing, no value judgments from us, just the expenses. And then Perkins and Daly over there would have to decide what are they going to charge the actual customers.
Okay, Mr. Hosfeld.
So in a very general sense, Mountain View is charging a rate for recycled water. It's about 2/3 of our potable rate. It essentially at this point is covering the costs of amortizing the construction cost of the system. So there's a break even. So there's an incentive for the potable water users to move to the recycled where it's available. And again, it's just paying off the investment. It's not going anywhere beyond that. And that's a fine line for us. And that may change as hopefully the recycled water use increases. But that's the goal. From a perspective of the investment of the advanced treatment, it's our assumption that at some point, if there's a advanced treatment plant that's constructed for $1 million or $20 million or whatever that might be, that Mountain View would fund that share as well. So,
well, that's very interesting. I hadn't appreciated that you are charging 2/3 of the potable rate.
We're certainly not giving it away at this point.
Oh, good. Well, it establishes a market value for non-potable water that's actually quite high, given how high our hetch-hetchy water is. It's great. Member Estromera.
Thank you, Pat. I just had a couple questions about stormwater use. I'd ask Karen about that. I look at that as an enhancement to our system in San Jose because we haven't yet figured out how to incorporate it, and I know we've asked our staff to take a look at that. I know LA and other cities are looking at what we do. The reason I say it's an enhancement is because I agree with Lenny that all the water that we have is recycled, either by nature or us or both. And so stormwater is just another supply that we got to figure out what to do with, instead of flushing it out to sea. So I wonder what's your perspective on it? How are we looking at it as a city I ask you because we don't have experience with stormwater at the water district, only that it's water, and that it's contaminated, and we don't want it as part of our drinking supply. But as I mentioned, we could recycle anything, and when you're in Silicon Valley, you believe you can do anything, and certainly we believe in science. So that's why I look at it as a positive enhancement to our water supply, and I wonder how it is as a city that you're dealing with it, so that when we look at it, gives us some hints.
So as a city, one way that we're looking at stormwater is through green infrastructure, so slowing the flow of water, basically taking away your downspouts directly to storm drains, putting in impervious pavers, putting in areas that are vegetated strips. We have a Southgate area that we actually is a great model for green infrastructure because our existing storm drain system couldn't handle the flow. So we actually built in these vegetative islands that would slow the flow, the water would percolate down, and then higher level flows would actually go down to the storm drain system, but it helps slow that flow. So our goal is, this is also a requirement in our stormwater permit, is to put as much green infrastructure as we can. That's our staff goal. We haven't had council direction of this yet, but it's a requirement in all of our cities within Santa Clara County to build a green infrastructure plan. That's part of our stormwater municipal, regional, and PDS permit. So you'll be seeing your cities all basically having to come up with a green infrastructure plan, and then it's up to the cities to determine how much of that do they put forward. So that's our envision for stormwater, is how do we basically take away some of the piping and slow the flow down, and that actually cleans up the water as well. Do you want to add more to that, Phil?
Well, I was just going to say, you'll notice on this chart that we have a bubble for that, because we too recognize that we're going to have to consider that in the future. We're going to have to consider gray water, black water, storm water. How do we use all three of those things? Is it all totally on-site, or do they somehow get involved with our pipeline system, or do we try to just let them recharge the groundwater and then use the groundwater? So I think all of us are trying to figure that out, and certainly we in Palo Alto don't have the answers. We were only smart enough to put it on this diagram. So just be assured that it's one of the things we're going to look at. And since I love this diagram so much, I'm actually going to pass it out so everybody has it in front of them as we continue the discussion.
Okay, and so on that note, let us allow you to continue your presentation.
So we're almost done with So we're almost done with what will be included in this Northwest County Recycle Water Strategic Planning effort. So the last few, all of those pieces of Phil's diagram will go into the center, which is updating that Recycle Water Strategic Plan. Obviously, we need to look for funding for all of these proposals. And then, yes, you're right. Public outreach is always part of our general day in, day out. So we view public outreach as part of that Recycle Water Strategic Plan, but we're always doing public outreach. So that's going to continue. We're just trying to figure out how to enhance it even more. So I totally agree with that comment. We also have the mayor from East Palo Alto here, and I wanted to give a little bit of an update on what we've been working on with the East Palo Alto recycle water deliveries. That was requested specifically from this committee. So if you can see, the city of Palo Alto, the regional water quality control plant is right here, and we currently feed recycled water for our existing golf course. And they are, if you notice, traffic is very congested here because they're doing a lot of work on San Francisco Creek, which is right here. The San Francisco Creek Joint Powers Authority, they are going to be putting in a ton of planting on both sides of the creek once they raise the levee system and improve the flow. And so there's this little friendship bridge that links East Palo Alto and Palo Alto. And originally, we're going to be feeding the city of East Palo Alto didn't have enough water allocation to make sure those plantings are staying alive. So we're already going to be putting a 2-inch line all over that friendship bridge. We've managed to upsize that to a 4-inch line. So there is the possibility, there is this little park right here that we need to work with East Palo Alto to see maybe there's opportunities to put in a storage tank or something so you can use it for construction dewatering when you end up getting your Gloria well online and you don't have that anymore for construction. So there are opportunities there for East Palo Alto that's just a very small portion, but the strategic plan will look at larger components of recycled water potential uses in East Palo Alto. So this is just where we're at today. And then I'm going to hand it over to Greg.
So, since I've just been answering questions, my name is Greg Hosfeld. I'm the Assistant Public Works Director for the City of Mountain View. And I want to give just one very brief organizational contrast. Within Palo Alto, the water and recycled water are different operations. I just need to let you know within Mountain View, Public Works is water and sewer and storm and recycled water. So a different structure, so we get to answer all our questions and kind of debate internally within Public Works how things should be done. What I want to share here is just a very quick overview of Mountain View's recycled water system. You've got a map of our existing pipeline network showing in front of you. That runs exclusively at this point north of Highway 101 in our North Bayshore area. Currently, we're distributing about 400,000 gallons per day of recycled water. We have a number of connections that have not been completed within the system. We think at full capacity, when we're fully serving all our users, it'll be about 600,000 gallons a day. That will increase, assuming we start doing some advanced treatment, and then any new developments within the North Bayshore area will also be served, since it is within our city code that if you are in an area where recycled water is available, you will use it for irrigation. So the North Bayshore area is pretty busy with pending construction, a lot of which will be dual plumbed, I believe, and they will be served with recycled water as well. So the system you see in front of you is almost entirely part of the original construction. We've done some small additions, and I'll talk about the next set of additions here. So to supplement the system we have now, we're looking to expand east to Moffett Field and NASA. And little hard to see on this map, but you've got some yellow lines there which show up on the east side of Stevens Creek. Technically, although those are within the city of Mountain View and city limits, that area is under federal jurisdiction. And we don't have a lot to say about what's going on there from a construction standpoint, although that line through NASA and Moffett is currently being constructed. They broke ground in late 2015. Should be done with a lot of that yellow section at the end of 2017. So our next goal is to connect our existing system, get a couple lines going across Stevens Creek, and start supplying recycled water to that area. All told, when they really get up and going on construction, we're looking 250 to 300,000 gallons a day in that area. After that's done, or hopefully concurrently, the next expansion we're looking at, although we don't have it scheduled yet, we will be going to our council this evening to start planning for the next part of the distribution system, which will serve the Middlefield Road, Ellis-Wisman area, which is south of Highway 101. Ultimately, we're hoping to connect that system to the construction that's currently going on within the NASA Moffett area and start serving the businesses, again, south of Highway 101. When all these things are put together, we should be somewhere in the area of 1 million gallons per day plus of recycled water service. The other important thing to note on the next system expansion is that ideally, and we're working on the plans now, we will connect to the City of Sunnyvale system, so water would be able to go back and forth depending on where the need was. Those are discussions that are kind of ongoing with some of the companies that are developing the properties that are out on the border, and then also with the City of Sunnyvale. So we have tentative plans to make that happen, which will help in the regional recycled water system effort. That's your very quick summary of what's happening in Mountain View. We are working more on a white paper that we'll be working with our council in the next several months to let them know that in addition to these plans, some of the other opportunities we may want to consider to expand our recycled water use. Certainly it will include most of the topics you're hearing discussed today, as well as the discussion of the advanced treatment feasibility study.
So I just want to add one thing just to the intertie with Sunnyvale has been, I think we brought this up at the last meeting, but Sunnyvale is looking at upgrading their entire wastewater treatment plant and potentially having their plant, all of their flow go to indirect potable reuse, potentially direct potable reuse. They have a lot of existing purple pipe in the ground, and they want to make sure that those customers continue to receive recycled water purple pipe quality. So that is part of the reason why that they've been talking to ourselves and Mountain View for the potential intertie. So that way when they switch their plant completely to a DPR, IPR plant, that we will still be able to supply them with recycled water quality for their dual plumbing and irrigation.
Member Kremen?
Is there any technical reason why some of the recycled transmission lines, larger ones, can't be used for either indirect potable water or direct? There's from a quality stainless steel point of view or anything like that, or can they be used?
No.
We don't think there's any technical reason why you couldn't use them. Some of them arguably may be older, and we'd have to check them out just from an age perspective.
There's no lead or any other usage?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Member Du Bois?
Yeah, so I'd just like to understand kind of the Sunnyvale relationship, I think, a little bit better. So the intertie right now, it sounded like it could go in two directions potentially, and then,
Well, potentially. Realistically, we're several years away from making that intertie happen, but from a directional standpoint, I don't think there's any engineering reason why water couldn't go back and forth. It's initially being set up that we would flow water to Sunnyvale.
And then, so they're not part of the regional water plant, so Mountain View would be selling Sunnyvale irrigation quality water?
Or whatever, right, whatever the quality going through. And that would be within the existing supply that we have in our contract. So that would not necessitate an expansion of supply. Going back to that the extension of the agreement, we've not asked for a supply increase throughout the duration of that contract. So that would be within where we are now.
And so, again, it kind of gets back to what I was asking earlier. What happens if, like Sunnyvale, we decided we wanted at some point in the future, most of that to go to IPR? Is Sunnyvale counting on us to provide irrigation water, even if, do we have the flexibility to decide that there's a higher use of that water?
Well, I think we would be flexible on whatever the use would be within the confines of the supply we have available. It's a very generic answer to say that if the use changes, we will change our goals along with it.
Okay, but
I think that answers your question.
I'm not sure. I mean, it seems like Sunnyvale is saying they want to go mostly potable, but they want to lock in a source of irrigation quality water. And I guess, is there a commitment to always deliver that into the future?
Not from our standpoint, no. And again, Mountain View being more through the distribution system as opposed to the provider of whoever determines the water quality. That's not on our end. We'll push through whatever we're getting, but again, that's a discussion between us and Palo Alto, what level we want that water to be.
And right now, the discussions with Sunnyvale are all just discussions. There's nothing on paper, so the kind of questions you're asking, of course, would have to be in a contract. How many years is this for? Sunnyvale would want a large number of years. We would not, because we'd want to maintain flexibility. So all the usual commodity questions would come into a contract that either Mountain View would have directly with Sunnyvale, or if they needed large enough and Palo Alto wanted to sell them some of its share for some period of years, Palo Alto could also be involved in that with it, sort of wheeling it through Mountain View.
Sure. Just to follow on. Member Rutherford.
Thank you. I've been listening. This is exciting for East Palo Alto also. We're glad to be at the table, and certainly we have our challenges. We will be continuing to look at our Gloria well and also the Pad D. However, we know that it's not going to produce enough water for us. So we entertain the partnership with Palo Alto and the rest of the partner. And thank you so much for your warm welcome. This is a learning curve for me, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be sitting here all the time. I may have to have one of our staff members, which I'd like to acknowledge Michelle and Massar, they're here also. But I think we will be coming with some recommendations, and we look forward to the RFP when it's out and the white paper. We certainly want to be as knowledgeable about this joint effort, and so I just wanted that to be known. I'm a good listener and taking in a lot of this information, and I will be, as well as staff, taking it back to the city manager and the rest of the staff. Thank you.
Thank you. I think for all of us, it's like drinking from a fire hose right now. And so I had one other follow-up question that I'm not assuming that there's a readily available answer, but I've been struggling for some time with this notion of, are we moving down a path where we may have the infrastructure of the Purple Line become a stranded asset wherever it may be? And on the one hand, it seems that there would remain a long-term demand for blended Purple Line water, we'll call it, at 2/3 or, well, the pre-blending, I guess, is 2/3 the market rate for Hetch Hetchy water. However, if we get to a point where we have, we've generated potable water with microfiltration and RO and whether it was, yeah, and potable with the oxidation as well. So 3 steps, and that cost to produce that water is a fraction of the cost of procuring Hetch Hetchy water. Then why would anyone want to buy the Purple Line water and then have to blend it with higher price Hetch Hetchy water? I'm trying to think through the commercial aspects of this, and that's not making sense to me yet. Mr. Hull?
Yeah, it's a really important long-term question, very strategic. And I think one of the things to think about is if you had this high-quality water and you were thinking about it in the sense of reuse, the first element that staff in Palo Alto and Mountain View have looked at is indirect potable reuse, where you put it in the groundwater. So the alignment of the piping that you need for the product water for that would really be looking at the best recharge areas. And so the second study that Karen described would really identify, is there potential there, and could it accept, and would there be an overall benefit in terms of the overall water supply to do that. But in the longer term future, once the regulations allow, we're all hoping for and pushing for the world of direct potable reuse. And so that has many unknowns in terms of how those structures would be. Typically now they want some kind of a buffer receiving water where there's some mixing and some time delay between the instant in time in which the produced water finally is produced and then finally enters into the drinking water chain. So all of those things have yet to be founded. And so the chances that you would find an opportunity for water that has been aligned for now non-potable use happen to be the pipeline direction that you need for a potable use, I mean for reuse is not very high, but it could be. The county, Santa Clara County broadly, the Water District has looked at this idea of some of the alignments that we're looking at for indirect potable reuse broadly, fed out of water from the San Jose system, and looked at maybe there's a possibility for some of those purple pipes to be repurposed for this very same purpose that has been raised. And it is a possibility, but so far it appears that the alignments are not really the same. They could be, but we haven't dismissed that idea. And as Director Kremen asked, is there any technical reason why not? And I support what Mr. Boble said. No, there's not. The pipes could be easily switched over after some inspection as to whether the life and the suitability, but in general they could be. But that's a pretty long answer, but I hope that gets to your question.
Could I just make it even a bit longer and just say that something else that might make you feel a little bit better about this stranded asset possibility, in addition to what Gar said, namely that maybe we'll continue forever to have multiple systems. Maybe we'll repurpose the pipelines So those were his two main points. I'd make a third point, and that is that these pipeline systems don't last forever. The systems that we're talking about in the future are not going to be here overnight. It may even take decades. So we're talking about long-term planning, which is great, but it also means that in the time frame of the engineering life of these pipeline systems, it all may work out anyway. When we think we don't have a need for a purple pipeline system, it may be 30 years old and not worth keeping up anyway. You know, our utility department currently spends, I don't know, a couple $1 million a year redoing pipeline systems, right? We march around the city. So you can't just think of this as something you're installing and it's good forever. Far from it, you know. It's good for some period of years. So even if we end up not using it toward the end of its life, like I say, it may all work out. We can't think of this as something you just install. We can make the decision not to maintain it, and that'll save us an amazing amount of money.
Member Siegel.
What percentage of the output of the current recycled water output would be channeled through the advanced treatment system?
So that's a loaded question because it depends on how much we're producing. So our current facility can produce 4.5 million gallons of water per day. And so we're looking at probably 50-50. But we also, part of the scoping will be maybe we put the 4.5 million gallons per day through our filters, but then we route the rest of the water through the microfiltration RO, and then we can blend more water. So that's part of this feasibility study to see, based on demand, how do we build it, how do we design it? So we're looking about a 50-50 blend to get down to the 450 TDS.
So there were just a couple more slides.
So for the large RFP, looking at the Recycle Water Strategic Plan, we're hoping to release it by the end of March. So that's hopefully this week. It may be pushed to early April. We're anticipating we've pushed the timeline a little bit out, but probably interviews in May. We're also working on our cost share agreement between Palo Alto and the Water District. We're anticipating working on that in May. And then we're hoping either contract can issue a notice to proceed either end of June, and our council's out of July, so it might be early August. So it just depends on the timing of all that. And then I think the next slide is Hussein's.
Yeah, I have only one slide here. We're just talking about the grant funding. I know it's just only one slide, but it's very important to you and to us as a staff. Just talking about grant funding, what is available and how we can apply for it. So the good news is because of drought and also the emphasis of federal and state on encouraging for expansion of recycled water, so much money available on both the state level and federal level.
Pardon me. I realize this is now for the second agenda item, and we have some speaker cards for the first. So if it's okay, we'll go ahead and hear from members of the public and then return. My apology. So we have two speaker cards, Trish Mulvey to be followed by Peter Dreckmeyer. Is Trish here? Oh, there we are. And you're both welcome to speak up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sometimes time flies faster than you think, and looking back 25 years ago to when you and I met, and Mr. Siegel, with the formation of Clean South Bay under the leadership of Communities for a Better Environment and the Silicon Valley Toxics Coalition. I've been a champion and cheerleader for recycled water for over a quarter of a century visibly, and longer than that personally. So I'm just thrilled that you're meeting, and particularly pleased that you're meeting here in the service area. Just a couple of quick points. Those of you that know me know that I really focus on working on things on a watershed basis. And we have a challenge here because the county line is a creek and not a watershed line. Member Keegan, when you mentioned the critical importance of public acceptance, public outreach, and the communities that you expect to be reached. For me, the most important one is East Palo Alto, and they're on the other side of the county line. So I would really ask as a committee that you figure out a way to make a commitment to not stop at the county line for those kinds of things. Second, I'd really like to go back to the very thoughtful, welcoming remark from Director Kremen. We've got to remedy the environmental injustice inequity that has plagued East Palo Alto forever, and I would really ask that you make that a priority as you consider going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And Peter Druckmeyer.
Good morning, Peter Druckmeyer with Tuolumne River Trust and a resident of the Creekshire neighborhood here in Palo Alto. And I think this is really wonderful to see you all coming together. I think it's fabulous that the agencies brought their best minds to the table. I have a lot of respect for all of you. And I think we're really on the right track. Appreciate all that staff has done. I think it's really important that we focus on turning problems and waste into resources. And there's a great opportunity here. We release 20 million gallons of recycled water into the bay every day. That's pretty much the amount of water that Mountain View and Palo Alto and East Palo Alto use in a day. So that's a great resource. We can't use it all, but there are tremendous opportunities. And I love the fact that different groups within each agency, and I love the Mountain View model of integrating water. Water is one resource. So when we look at supply and wastewater and flood water as all one resource, I think that's really important. So it's great to see different departments within Palo Alto here, utilities and public works. And it's great to see just the different agencies because, as Trish pointed out, groundwater and other resources don't obey political jurisdictions. And we know our groundwater basin actually extends from Burlingame down through Santa Clara up in Alameda County up to Richmond. It's all part of the Santa Clara Basin, and then we have these sub-basins. There's been a lot of interest in groundwater lately, and it's been wonderful to see the different agencies coming together and acknowledging that it's a shared resource that we all need to work together to protect. San Mateo County is working on a groundwater assessment, which is going to be very helpful. Palo Alto is doing its work, and this is all going to add up to, I think, very good things. Director Keegan, you mentioned public information and getting the public on board, and I very much agree with that. I think the conservation movement is ready to help out. There's a lot of support for indirect potable reuse these days. And last Wednesday, we had the 8th annual Silicon Valley Water Conservation Awards at Google in Mountain View. And Google actually won an award 2 years ago, largely due to their recycled water use at their headquarters, so doing great stuff. But we capped the awards, and actually Trish Mulvey received the Lifetime Achievement Award, so congratulations, Trish. But we capped the event tasting recycled beer. It was actually beer made from advanced purified recycled water. So it was using recycled water that could be drunk. And it was very popular. Well, just to finish off with a few more serious comments, I think a great opportunity for recharging the groundwater basin would be partnering with Stanford, and great to see Tom Zichterman here. And Lake Lagunita and San Francisco Creek could be great recharge opportunities. There's also additional value in habitat enhancement for the California tiger salamander at Lake Lagunita and steelhead trout and other species in San Francisco Creek. And it would be a great way to not only enhance flows, but also recharge a groundwater basin to avoid impacts. And finally, I just want to say, Mayor Rutherford, it's great to see your involvement here, and I want to let you know your staff did a fantastic job with the groundwater management plan. You should be very proud of them. Thank you all.
Thank you, former Mayor Druckmeyer. All right, and now we'll return to Mr. Ashtorap.
Yes, thank you. I was telling about the success that we had, especially during the drought, and also state and federal has been really encouraging our expansion of recycled water. In terms of receiving grants, the district has been experienced to go after the grants very carefully and has been successful in that. So we're going to help with Palo Alto and Mountain View projects in this one. There's a left-hand side, the state funding available right now, a state revolving fund that's a low-interest loan. A lot of agencies now interested on that. It's about 1.5% interest on that. And also Prop 1 funding, there's a lot of money available for that for recycled water. On the right-hand side, of course, the Bureau has Title 16 money available, and I understand that Palo Alto has some authorization that we should go on to after the appropriation for this, for the projects that we have. So with that, I would like to mention that we are jointly going to work to, in the next 2 years, to get as much as money available from the grant and low interest funding for those projects.
Thank you. And do you have any kind of ballpark about the kinds of dollars that may be available through these grants?
Yeah, I have a table here, but this table is changing every day, and some of them increasing rather than decreasing. Like for the state revolving fund, low interest loan, there is about $500 million available that I heard that went to $800 million. And for the Prop 1, $625 million available. And that's also being revised and may go up again. So I think the next 2 years, we're seeing a lot of money available for
And the Prop 1 is grants, correct? Not
Prop 1 is
loans.
grants,
right. Thank you. All right. Member Kremen.
Are there any deadlines for Prop 1 applications upon us, the concept paper, et cetera, that maybe we could shoehorn our way in potentially, or are we okay on that?
Yes, some of them, they have a deadline, and some of them are first come, first serve. For low interest loan, it's first come, first serve. For Prop 1, it was December of last year, and the next one is not been publicized yet. So the state is going to talk about it in the near future.
Can I just add that one of the great advantages that Palo Alto has is in terms of its recycled water plan that was released just recently, the final EIR. That is often a stumbling block for those who are applying for Prop 1 grants. You need to have CEQA done. You've got it. For that aspect of your work, you've got it. And so to the extent that that is the development you decide to proceed with, it's almost immediately available for Prop 1 applications.
And I'll note that Mr. Hall is very attuned to Palo Alto utility matters because until recently he was a member of our Utility Advisory Commission. Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone else have any questions on this item? All right. So then our final item is to return to item number 3. This was agendized as an election of officers. So I don't know who wishes to speak to this. Member?
I'd like to make a motion to re-elect Chair Burt as chair.
Thank you. All right. Any discussion or other nominations? All right. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. That passes unanimously. And I would like to move to re-elect Member Estremera as vice chair.
I'd like to make a second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. And that passes unanimously. I wish we were so efficient at everything. So I think that concludes, except to talk about our next meeting and tentative agenda. So first question is the frequency and standardizing a date and whether we want to move in that direction. We've had challenges coming together on common meeting times. Mr. Hall, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, staff is at the committee's pleasure, but Mr. Bowl and I were thinking jointly that perhaps quarterly meetings would be suitable, given, especially for the near term, because there's a lot of things that are going to be happening, new RFPs coming out and new directions that are going to be wanted to be communicated to the committee. Later, perhaps less frequently, but at least for the next year, we're thinking perhaps the committee might entertain quarterly meetings.
How does that sound to colleagues? Director Keegan?
I just wanted to say that if we wanted to discuss finalizing the scope of work for the strategic plan, is quarterly a little too late to provide that input?
So when we put together this agenda, it was in January because we thought we were meeting you in February, and I didn't get a chance to modify the agenda the packet. So the scope of work has actually been finalized, and it's going out hopefully by the end of this week. So we can send you a copy of the scope of work, and then we can always have you guys modify contract once we go to contract.
Right. I think that the opportunity is they'll be doing the consultant, as always, will be doing their own scope based on ours, but other things can be inserted and removed at that time. So, we could schedule the meeting more or less, the next one more or less quarterly, but to make sure that we do it ahead of that contract approval so that you can do that.
I think that's a wise idea, and I probably shouldn't have mentioned this earlier in the agenda, but I think the scope is going to be a little difficult to pin down, given that there's so many moving parts. As you mentioned in your presentation, Ms. North, the white paper that was developed on satellite and on-site treatment and reuse and storm use, we're moving into different ways of capturing stormwater and wastewater and how we manage them. So a lot of different pieces to pull together, and I look forward to seeing the ultimate strategic plan. Thank you.
Member Du Bois?
Yes, back to schedule. I suggest we establish, quarterly meetings for the rest of the year, and we just establish the dates, and if not everybody can make it, we stick to those dates. I think part of the problem has been we've been moving around trying to find a time that everybody can be present.
So what we have today is the last Tuesday of the month. We could settle on that, or we could pick another standard date within a month. Does anybody have any ongoing conflicts where this date wouldn't work? So if it's all right, pardon me?
If we did quarterly, you'd be talking about June.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that would, for instance, our council has a July vacation, so that would fit right before then, as long as nobody's cutting out early. Sounds correct.
And what do you suggest for December?
Oh, good point. We're getting, that would be a holiday party in December. Yeah, so the December one, let's tentatively plan we would move that forward in the month. But the others will stay at the last Tuesday just to establish some regularity.
That would be October.
Yeah, no, it'd be September.
September 27th.
And then we'll come up with a date. And if it's all right, our city clerk would be glad to take over sending out schedules and agendas going forward, and we can do that if that seems fine with everybody.
If I could just, am I on? We meet for our board meetings on the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays of the month, so June 28th is a board meeting, and our board meetings are at night. So an afternoon meeting, perhaps early afternoon, might be preferable, just because our meetings sometimes go very late. So, and it takes a while, too. So that's just.
So we'd be meeting on Tuesday in the afternoon, and then you'd have a Tuesday night board meeting?
Correct.
So that's, it's fine with me. How does that fit with other people?
1 o'clock.
Yeah, that would work for me.
How is that for everyone else?
This is the fourth?
Well, for each of the meetings, that they would be at 1 o'clock rather than at this 10 o'clock. Would that work?
Which Tuesday?
So it would be the last Tuesday of each quarter, so June 28th at 1 p.m. and September 27th at 1 p.m.
Can we go ahead and schedule the end of the year, November, December?
Yeah, so then the final meeting perhaps would be in early December. Do we want to go ahead and attempt to schedule this right now? Probably.
That's our best bet.
Yeah. So, does anyone have any Tuesday conflicts in early December that we should rule out dates on? So if we have, go right ahead.
Our meetings are the first and third Tuesday, so.
And we'd be meeting at 1 in the afternoon.
And
Would
that's
that be
fine.
okay?
2 hours?
Yeah. What, hour
That'll
and a
be
half,
fine.
probably.
That'll be fine.
Okay. So,
Suggest December 6th.
6th? That would be great by me. Does December 6th at 1 p.m. work for everyone? All right, we've accomplished that. Very good. So on that note, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.